Hi everybody, I'm Kate Messner. Welcome to this week's Marty McGuire Global Read Aloud Video Q&A. I got a ton of questions submitted on the blog this week, so let's get right to it. Ms. Victor's class in Berlin, Germany asks, do you want to write another Marty McGuire book after Marty McGuire has too many pets? Well, maybe someday, but probably not right away because I have some other projects I'm going to be working on. Mrs. Hudson's class says, why don't you like princesses? Well, I don't really have anything against princesses. Marty doesn't really want to be a princess or dress like one, but that doesn't mean that Kate doesn't like princesses. I don't dress like them either, though. Mrs. Ivy's class at Robius Elementary in Midlothian, Virginia, says we are wondering what you think is the most important lesson we can learn from Marty. Well, mostly what I hope you'll learn from Marty is that reading is really fun and stories are great. But I suppose if you're going to take anything else away from her, maybe that is that when you have to do something, probably you can find a way to make it more interesting and make it your own. Mrs. Aubrey's grade 3 class at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton School in Barrhaven, Ontario, says, why did you choose to have Marty in a family of 3? Does Marty have a brother or a sister we haven't heard about yet? Well, no, she doesn't, at least not in my head. I chose to have Marty in a family of 3 because, to be perfectly honest, that was the way I imagined her. Some characters come to me and they already have brothers and sisters and I can picture their whole families. Marty came to me with just herself and her mom and dad and, of course, her grandmothers who hang around sometimes and the occasional stray wildlife, but no brothers and sisters, and that's just kind of how she came into my mind. Sherry Greenley's class at the American School of Doha would like to know what your literature classes were like when you were small. Teachers read aloud to me. And we read a lot of books on our own, but what I remember most probably are teachers reading out loud. As a matter of fact, let's see, this was one of my favorite books that was read aloud when I was in school, E.B. White's The Trumpet of the Swan. And after it was read to us, I read it myself over and over and over again. Ms. Buchol's class says, how do you name your characters? Well, some of their names just sort of pop into my head, and there they are. Marty McGuire's last name is a family name, and other characters I borrow names from people I've met over the years, and sometimes family members too. Mrs. Alloy, I think I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, is named after my sister-in-law, who's also a teacher. Mrs. Langha's first grade class at the Madeline School in Portland, Oregon, says, oh, our school is just 9 blocks from Grant Park, the home of the sculpture garden with that Beverly Cleary statue garden that is mentioned in Chapter 8. How cool is that? And this class says, why did you use maracas in your story? Well, to be honest, when I was a teacher, we had a staff development day once where all the teachers get together and learn, and we had a presenter at our staff development day who used that strategy, only not with kids, with teachers, and we all thought it was kind of funny, but I thought it would be a great thing for a teacher to do with students to, let her know that she wanted to get their attention. Ms. Dumas' third grade class at Garner Elementary in Clio, Michigan, says, have you, or are you going to write another series besides Marty McGuire? Well, yes, and yes. I actually have a mystery series that is out now. The first book in that series is called Capture the Flag, and the second one is called Hide and Seek, and a third one called Manhunt comes out in July. You guys can look those up on my website if you want to know more about them. I have a little series about a sea monster with Chronicle books. These are picture books, so we've got Sea Monster's First Day, and then Sea Monster and the Bossy Fish, which is about how to deal with a bossy fish. And I'm actually working on a brand new series with Scholastic right now. I would show you the cover of that one, but it's sort of, well, it kind of looks like this at the moment. Just lots and lots of notes, and actually I have a draft of it done on my computer, and I am revising that book right now. It's about a search and rescue dog who can travel through time. And the first book is going to be set on the Oregon Trail, but that will not be out until 2015, so you have a little while to wait on that one. All right, Mrs. Muller's class says, how did you decide on Sparky the Raccoon's name? That was one of those names that just popped into my head and seemed right for a raccoon that threw fig Newtons at people. Ms. Crombie's grade 1-2 at Beech Grove Elementary in Delta, British Columbia says, have you ever been in a play, and if so, what was it? I was in a play in junior high school when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and the play was called Bye Bye Birdie. I was one of the teenagers in that play, and the scene I remember is we were all pretending to be on telephones and talking on the phone as we sang a song. Mrs. Rumberger's class wants to know, how might Sparky react if he met the frog? Well, that's a great question. I don't know, maybe Sparky would want to eat the frog. I think raccoons do eat frogs sometimes. It's probably best that didn't happen. Mrs. Murphy's first grade in Marshall, Wisconsin asks, what is your favorite book that you have written so far? Boy, that's a hard question to ask an author. When I do school visits, kids always want to know that, and I tell them it's a little like asking a parent, who's your favorite kid? But I will tell you that I'm super, super excited about that third Marty McGuire book coming out in January. Marty McGuire Has Too Many Pets. So if you made me choose a favorite right now, maybe it would be that one. Mrs. Malloy's first grade class from Edison, New Jersey asks, we were wondering if you love helping animals because you mentioned that Marty's mom was an animal rehabilitator and Marty loves frogs. Well, the truth is, I don't have any formal experience with wildlife rehabilitation the way Marty's mother did. We did save a baby squirrel in our yard once, and I do love animals, so kind of. Mrs. Batchelor's second graders from Heartland, Wisconsin ask, when you are stuck on thinking of an idea to write about, where do you get ideas from? Well, I'm actually going to post an image on the blog, so look down there and you'll see the image. But sometimes when I'm stuck and I need to come up with a new idea, I use this brainstorming strategy where I put 3 columns on a sheet of paper. And in the first column, I make a big list of things I like and things I find interesting and things that scare me. And in the second column, I make a huge list of settings, places I love, places I'd like to learn about or visit, places that scare me, places that I wish were real. And in the third column, I make a list of themes and genres, kinds of books that I like to read, ideas I might like to explore, so things like friendship and secrets, or genres like mystery, fantasy, graphic novel. And then I start playing around and mixing ideas from those columns. So I'd say, what might this idea in the first column look like if I set that story in an airport or on the moon or someplace else? So you guys can take a look at that brainstorming strategy down below and try it yourself if you want. You might come up with some great story ideas. All right. Mrs. Coote's grade 3 class in Forestburg, Alberta says, why did you add the ruby slippers and the Wizard of Oz to the story? Did you read the Wizard of Oz when you were younger? I did, and actually we also used to watch it on TV, the movie. Back then, when I was growing up, you didn't watch DVDs or Netflix or anything like that. You had to wait for a movie you wanted to see to come on TV, and The Wizard of Oz was on once a year, and we always planned our whole week around it. So I did love the ruby slippers and that Wicked Witch too. Mrs. Schapp's class at the San Diego Jewish Academy says, Layla in our class wants to know why you made Veronica Grace so all about me and selfish. Well, to be honest, I made Veronica Grace that way to make her difficult for Marty to get along with. I wanted her to be a real challenge for Marty in school. Mrs. Bernhardt's second grade class at the American International School of Muscat in Oman says, we have another question for you. What are some of your favorite books to read? I have a lot of favorite books right now. And when I was your age, I had some that are still my favorites today. Let's see, let me grab 2 of those. My 2 favorite authors were Beverly Cleary, who wrote the Ramona books, and Judy Blume, who wrote Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Super Fudge, and I still have those books on my shelf. I actually have a special shelf for my favorites in my writing room here. All right, Mrs. Hanson's second grade class in Litchfield, Minnesota says, we're wondering why you chose the school for the setting of Marty McGuire. Great question. I think the biggest reason is that every kid knows that setting. I mean, you think about it, everybody has to go to school in 3rd grade. So I thought it was a setting that kids would know and feel comfortable with, and it would seem familiar. Mrs. Dearman's second grade class asks, did you do the same things Marty did when you were a little girl? Well, if you're asking about specific things, like did I ever sneak a real live frog into a play? The answer is no. But did I like a lot of the same things, like catching crayfish and frogs? Yes, I sure did. Mrs. Lowe's class at J.W. Reason Elementary in Hilliard, Ohio, says, was your school growing up as chaotic as some of the events in Marty's school? Well, no, not quite. I mean, funny things did happen sometimes, but I'm not sure any school is quite as chaotic as Marty's. Madame Amoa's readers in Hamilton, Ontario say, our grade 2 French immersion class at A.M. Cunningham School in Ontario, Canada, wonders why you picked The Frog Prince for the class play. We are also reading fairy tales. Well, the biggest reason I chose that fairy tale is because it had two things that were of interest to me. The princess, that could force Marty into that role she really didn't want, and the frog, which would make the role better for her. Mrs. Arnold's class, in second grade class at Northeast School in Ithaca, New York, has a question that another class actually mentioned too. Why did you choose for the frog that they catch to be a girl and not a boy? I don't know. Maybe because often when we think of a frog, we would think of it as being a boy. I think sometimes we assign genders to animals that way. I don't know if people do that, but sometimes I think of a particular animal as a certain gender, and, frog can be either, so I just chose to have it be a girl. Mrs. Wood's class says, how would that frog turn into a prince? Well, the only answer I have for that is magic. It would have to be fairy tale magic. The grade 2 students and Mr. Himes' class at St. Patrick's Episcopal Day School in Washington, D.C., are wondering how I came up with the scene where Marty lied to Mrs. Alloy about having her mom sew the frog together while she was really planning to just put the real frog into the wishing well. One other class asked me about that too, about why Marty lied in the story. It's really important to me when I create a character that character not be perfect, because real kids, real people, aren't perfect. None of us are, and we all make mistakes, and so it seemed realistic for Marty to make some mistakes too. And Mrs. Axtell's second grade at Star Elementary School in Ohio has the last question of the day. We love to make the illustrations to match our writing. Do you ever like to create your own illustrations? Well, I don't illustrate my own books in the sense that, I haven't drawn these pictures in Sea Monster and the Bossy Fish, for example. In these books, a very talented illustrator named Andy Rash did the illustrations. And in Marty McGuire, of course, that illustrator is Brian Floca. But do I like to draw? I sure do. Sometimes, if I can find an example here, I draw to help me write. So, for example, if I'm writing a story with a particular setting, I might draw a really rough map of that setting so I can look at it and figure out where things happen. And that kind of keeps me on track when I'm writing, and it also gives me ideas. So those are our questions this week. Thank you guys for submitting so many great questions that you wanted to know about. We'll have another video next Friday. If you would like to ask a question for next week's video, please post your question as a comment on this blog post, not one of the other ones. That way I'll be able to find it and make sure it gets included no later than Wednesday. I don't know what the date is Wednesday, but you know what I mean. The Wednesday after Halloween. That's the deadline. Hope you guys all had a great Halloween and have a great week. Keep reading.